Hey, it's TDA and welcome back to Astro Colony. I'm having a lot of fun with this game. Last time around we built this awesome looking dome that actually allows me to breathe on the platform so I don't have to manually refill every time. And we also built these spider robots over here. And these are going to allow me to transport items from any facility to any other facility, which is in turn going to allow me to completely redo our entire layout because, well, even though it's fairly organized with this belt kind of going from the production center over here all the way around and some splitting into all the different areas where we actually need those different resources, it is not the most efficient way to do that. And the best example is probably coal, because we need coal in several different places. For example, over here in the first carbon reactor, half of all the coal that we produce is going to go in here, so that's why we have a huge stockpile of coal. But if we check the last carbon reactor, there's pretty much none of that coal is actually reaching over here because it's being split 50%, 50%, 50%, 50%, and so on. So there's barely any coal coming through. Which means that there's even less coal coming in these facilities. It's not going to go in here anyway, but for example, where is it? Over here. Into this smelter, because we want to make some iron rods over here from these plates. For this, and well, the coal is not actually going to reach there, so we need to make this layout a lot more efficient. We probably also want to increase the production of our raw resources, because even though these 3 asteroid catchers are definitely putting in a lot of hard work, they're simply not going to cut it. Speaking of not going to cut it, well, the obvious problem with the carbon that I just showed you with the carbon reactors is just going to get stronger, and we also have access to a different type of fuel production, or power production I should say, in the form of solar energy. Now, solar energy is actually going to require golden wire, and gold is fairly rare. As you can see, I did gather some gold in the meanwhile, and that should allow me to build some solar panels. So I'm gonna go and probably remove all of this, but probably first extend our platform, and then we are going to have to pretty much redo our entire layout. So that's going to be a lot of fun, but I think it's going to be worth it so much, because we're going to be able to take advantage of all the new stuff we unlocked, and the end result will be a lot more efficient than what we have now. Step 1, out with the olds. And of course, once you start a redesign like this, it's better to do it sooner rather than later, but you also need to keep in mind a couple of things. So first of all, you want to make sure that if you have one of these storage warehouses, then I would suggest just leaving it for the time being, for the simple reason that you can access the resources in there from wherever you want, and of course that's just very convenient. I also would recommend to keep your base production, at least your raw resource production, up and running, for the simple reason that it will take you a little bit of time to actually redo the entire design, and in the meanwhile this will keep producing, not necessarily the later tier items of course, but you will get the raw materials, so you will never run out that way. You will also need some power, and in order to have that power up and running, as you can see I took out all the belts, you will want those robots to actually carry that back and forth. Now you can actually see my robots currently being stuck. The little red arrow is trying to guide them to the outward port on this facility, but that's currently being blocked by this power facility. So probably if I remove this, I don't want to remove the flooring, I only want to remove the power cable. There we go. Then that should hopefully make it easier for the robots to actually reach. Yep, there you go. We're not going to need that much power. This is 20 power in total, which should be sufficient, I think. Whoop, I didn't want to jump in there. Sorry about that. Yeah, so these 3 are going to be producing with 12 power each. As you can see, we're only at 95% efficiency. That's because we also have this beacon over here with the oxygen, because of course I don't want to manually do that, and in order to make sure that production keeps up and running, we also have this. Now this water production has been producing a lot, so we have 600 water in storage, so that's going to be quite sufficient. But yeah, that will actually allow us to keep producing. Now, let's see, we are going to need a lot of flooring, but since I just took out a lot of buildings, something else to keep in mind is that we probably want to build a recycling machine, because we don't automatically get our materials back in this game. Let's see, how should we face that? I don't think it really matters, honestly, so let's just put it like that, because I like the way it looks like that a lot better. Let's see, where is the power? There it is. We are using the thin flooring still, so we can easily fit that through. Let's make sure we get that up and running. There we go. And there we go. We have a recycling unit. Now, everything I removed in this game so far, which includes a lot of belts and a lot of other buildings, we can put that in the recycling machine, and it will start recycling that for us and get us our resources back, basically. Now, it will take a lot of time, so if you are deleting a lot of stuff, be prepared for it to take a long time to get your materials back. But again, as long as you just dump it in there every now and then, it shouldn't be too hard to just go back there every 5 minutes or so, or maybe even less than that, and just grab whatever you need. It's not a game where you have long distances, so that sounds like a lot of hassle. It really is not. Step 2, place a lot of foundations down and basically scale up your production by a truckload. So yeah, we have a total of 10 automated asteroid catchers now, 5 on each side. And I think it's starting to look like a very organized facility. We also have these 6 carbon generators in order to make sure we have enough power for that, and we don't have a single belt placed down at the moment. Now, of course, it is not going to be efficient not to use any belts whatsoever, because as you can see, well, we have only 4 robots and we can of course build more, but realistically the only place for the raw resources to go is into a smelter, so we might as well just do that with a belt, because there's really no reason not to do that. That's going to save a ton of these spiders running around, and that will just make sure that those spiders can do something that's actually useful. So let's see, if we now have the base resource production up and running, where to next? Well, I think, like I said, the smelters as well as a natural place for the coal to go, because I do think having the coal into a storage unit and then being split off into the actual coal generators is going to be very efficient. And I keep saying coal, I know it's carbon, but I'm just gonna keep calling it coal anyway. There we go, this looks a lot better. Now, if it looks like a lot of congestion on this belt over here, that is actually true, but it's only true because these asteroid catchers have been working for a very long time before I connected them to the belt. So right now they're just unloading the materials that were already in there, and as you can see, we're currently splitting them off. So every ore that's going to be melted into bars is going to go into a smelter, and the carbon, yes, I said carbon, as well as the ice is going to go in a storage unit over here. Now, that's a very convenient place for it to go, because basically that means that our robots can spread the coal between our coal generators, as well as a tiny bit of coal going into the hydro generator. And of course, the ice is going to have to go into this icebreaker over here. This icebreaker won't actually be able to handle all the demand from these 2 buildings, but we don't need these buildings to operate at full functionality anyway, because they're only producing oxygen, which we don't need that much of at the moment, and they're also going to be producing hydrogen, which we basically only need to fuel our base. At least that's what we're going to be mainly using it for. Now, as you might have noticed, I also took care of the little interruptions of the pattern. That was really bothering me, so I replaced those floors with the actual flooring that was right next to it as well, so we don't have these annoying gaps in here. I redid the layout in the middle as well, and I removed the temporary buildings that we had producing there. That means that we are now ready to actually start up some production. So what we're going to need is several things. We are going to need a constructor, we are going to need a laboratory, and of course we are going to need a manufacturer as well. Before we place all of that down, I actually think we want to produce the robots first. The robots actually don't collide, so you can just build over a robot and just make sure we have a healthy supply of robots to go. Producing some of these robots doesn't take that long at all, and again, this is a pretty huge building to just have standing there because we won't be producing the robots non-stop, so I am going to remove it. I'm not entirely sure how much robots to go for. I'm aiming at the moment for something like 25. That's about equal to the amounts of buildings that I have, which is kind of arbitrary in terms of a number, but you definitely want enough to make sure that it doesn't actually interrupt the production. The production is going to take a little while to get going. And of course, because we are no longer transporting the actual raw materials to the smelter, that's going to save us a lot of time. So I think that's probably more than enough. And if it's not, well, we can always make more robots, but we definitely don't want robots to collide with each other and be all over the place. So I think 25 is a very good number to start with. And a true factory we have with all these robots working around. So let me walk you through what I've actually done. So we have the miner setup over here, and I've been playing around with it a little bit, but it seems like if you set the request by the transport robots to the default value, so that's with 50 and at least 5 robots assigned, it works a lot better than if you try to tune that to a lower value. And I mean, initially I thought, well, I'm not going to need that many iron rods, so why request this much resources? But if you take lower amounts, and especially if you assign fewer robots, it feels like the robots sometimes get confused what they're supposed to be doing. They just stop working altogether, they get stuck. In terms of getting stuck, it's definitely also important that you leave enough room between your buildings. So the way I've set this up right now, as you can see, it's kind of spacious, so it's very easy for the robots to move around, even though they are kind of still colliding a little bit with each other. It's not to the extent that they actually get stuck, so you just don't want any narrow corridors or things like that, or buildings sitting next to each other. That will just mess things up. Now I got a secondary smelter to the right over here, and of course we have the manual belt coming in, and then we basically have one building of each type. So we have a constructor over here, which is currently making everything I can, including the steel screws, which we don't really need at the moment, but hey, I can make them, so why not? There's no such thing of having too much resources. If we ever get to a point where we have more screws than we ever are going to use, all we need to do is just turn the production off. So that's always something we can do. In general, just keep producing because we have infinite resources anyway. We're also, of course, producing all these plates over here, which are then in turn going to be transported into the manufacturer, which is going to turn them into wires. Now, of course, we are also going to need a little bit of research. So we have the laboratory over here, which of course is just going to need some basic of these copper bars and iron bars, and then it's going to be making the engineering science. So that's the second type of science that we've unlocked. Now, we are going to need a steady supply of building materials. So I have base warehouse set up. There is a thing you need to know about these robots. You can only assign 5 types of resources to be requested. So as you can see, this fills up the bar completely. If you try to assign anything else to that, let's say coal or whatever, apparently you can. Why I can? Oh, it's actually 6. I thought it was 5. Anyway, I stand corrected, so it's 6. But of course, I don't actually need coal here. But the way I've assigned it is in such a way that we have all the copper things going here. Now we actually have carbon ore coming in here. No! Anyway, and then we have the liquids as well. So we have the hydrogen and oxygen production up and running here as well. Now on the other side, I have everything that's basically made from iron. So that's the steel and iron and wires, etc. And then all the way in the back, I have the little bit more advanced types of resources, which is mainly the gold ones. Now, of course, we're not going to have a huge amount of gold coming in, mainly because gold is quite rare at this point. There are asteroids that contain gold, but they are far and few between, so we're not going to get a huge supply of that. But speaking of gold, there is a very useful thing we can do with it at this point, and that is, let me look it up, make some solar energy. So that's the last thing I also did. I set up some solar power. Now, as you can see, because I have been producing for quite a while already, I did actually have some gold, and I turned that into some solar banks over here. Now, the layout is purely aesthetic, so there's no reason to necessarily do it like this, but I kind of like the looks of it. And of course, keep in mind that solar power is not something that's going to be extremely strong. It only produces 1 power per solar panel, so that's not going to stack up well against, for example, a carbon reactor, which produces 10. But it's completely free energy. So right now I have 10 on this side, 10 on the other side, and something like 10 here in the middle as well. So that's a total of 30 power, completely free, stable. Basically, we don't have to look at those solar panels ever again, and we will always have 30 power. Now, that sounds like a lot, it's really not, but at least, like I said, it's completely free, so why not make use of some of that gold? Now, I think that concludes the little tutorial we have going on over here on how to completely redesign your base once you get access to robots and make the most out of these tiny little spider movings all over the place. I hope you enjoyed this one, and please join me in the next episode when we're actually going to go to the stars. We are going to kind of expand our base, not just by expanding the platform, but actually connecting to one of these planetoids over here and get access to more resources that way, and actually more advanced resources as well than we can get from asteroids. So please join me in the next one. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't done so, please like and subscribe because that really helps me out.